Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This finger show, we're talking about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Flash, as well as the latest episode of Black Lightning. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of The Flash, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Black Lightning. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of The Flash. So, interestingly enough, obviously this deals a lot with Caitlyn's dad. I like all the teams kind of splitting up, and we kind of have OG team Flash looking into the Caitlyn thing, that just being Caitlyn, Barry, and Cisco. It's always kind of nice and just kind of interesting when you're like, oh yeah, like kind of the trio that kind of helped, start all of this to a certain extent, or just the original Team Flash, like I was saying. It's just kind of interesting when they team up, because they did it like last season too, but it's just kind of interesting. Nevertheless, they run into Caitlyn's dad, and it's like, okay, so he put himself, through, he was sick with ALS, and he was trying to use some experimental stuff to cure himself. Well, he was actually it turns out that's how Killer Frost came to be, because the experiments he was using to cure himself, he modified them to try and cure Caitlyn, because she had the ALS markers in her as well, hence why Killer Frost was created. And he's trying to make it seem like, it didn't manifest itself the same way. Because the question kept being like, oh, if she has Killer Frost, where's your other side? He's like, oh, I didn't develop one because I used a modified version in Caitlyn. It's like, oh, okay. Because Cisco's the only one that kept being like, yeah, something's fishy about this. Even I was there. Because immediately he was like, oh, Caitlyn. I was like, you finally came after all this time. I can't believe it. The moment he was like that, I was like, wait, you're lying to her, because it's like you're not bringing up the fact is we know you were watching her with the camera, but he was like, Barry and Cisco. I'm like, wait, what? It's like, he brings up the fact is that he did have access to it. I am curious, what is his story true? He said that Wells gave him the access to the cameras, but they weren't working this entire time, which obviously later when we find out is a lie. But it's like, was it Wells that actually gave it to him? Did Eobard know about, depends on which Wells that was. Was that the original Wells? Because that was like 20 years ago. Barry's situation happened like 14 years ago, so that was when Eobard disguised himself as, so that it was like he was in hiding for like 20 years, so it had to be like the original Wells that gave him access to it, because I was like, that's interesting. But nevertheless, well, because of course you wouldn't know about that, because the original Wells is dead. I mean, even if it was Eobard, you wouldn't know that from him. But still, I was wondering, I was like, because my thought process was like, is it Eobard, knowing who he really is, that he's this bad guy, like what his future entails? But it's like, no, it's the original Wells, potentially, with the time frame and everything. But then it's just kind of like, okay, so I was like, okay, I can let that slide. But things just did seem off, because it's like, I stayed in this facility, I was not able to reach out to you, your mom shut down the facility. It's like, because it's like, my experiments, they were dangerous, so I had to separate myself from you and stuff like that. But then it's like, your mom shut this down, and that's why I'm like, I don't get it. Like, it didn't make sense to me. I'm like, is that something her mom would really do? Like, it's like, yeah, I know her mom is kind of a villain in her eyes. She even talks about it later on, but it's like, it just didn't seem right. And then Cisco pieces it all together, because it's like, yeah, something definitely doesn't feel right when it's like, okay, we got to go through all this, give you this serum to kind of save your life. I mean, Cisco finds skin grafting stuff, and I'm like, he made skin. I was like, what is that? What? It's like, yeah, he's actually, which we later on dub Icicle, his Killer Frost persona. And it's like, he's just disguising himself to look like your dad. I was like, that's so interesting. But then he had an excuse for it. And the look on his face, like, that smug smile on his face is like, yeah, the way Cisco kind of, like, crashed and burned in front. I mean, to be fair, and I thought it was such an interesting element, because obviously, Caitlyn didn't want to listen, because it's like, no, I finally get to be with my dad. I'm not going to let anything get in my way. You're just being weird. You're being overprotective. You're just, you're being insane. You're coming up with all this stuff. Cisco, that's not what's going on here. And even Barry was blinded by the fact is, because it's like, such a heartwarming moment. Father and daughter reunited after all this time. And just because of his situation with Nora and like the time they're spending together, it made him go, he kind of looked at their situation and exactly like his, because it's kind of like, yeah, Nora had her reasons for lying and stuff like that. But, at the end, like, we spent time together and I enjoy all that time. So let's let Caitlyn have that time with her dad. But it's like, Cisco made him see that. It's like, no, you're looking at this from the wrong perspective. You're looking at it from a dad. Like, your situation with Nora is not the same as this situation. I mean, you could look at it almost kind of being similar, but you get what I mean. And it's like, you have to look at it from a CI perspective of like, yeah, things aren't 100%. Like, there are holes in this situation, which even Barry was like, yeah, you're right, there are holes in this. And he ended up talking to Caitlin about it, because it's like, at the end of the day, because Caitlin was like, the fact of the matter is, she already has a very estranged relationship with her mom, and she feels so alone, even more so since losing Killer Frost. And now she's like, I have no family. If I go in there questioning him and lose him like that, it's like, I'm gonna lose him, and I'm not gonna have any family left. Which Barry was like, no, you have us. We're your family. The fact of the matter is, we're not asking you to completely doubt him, but we're asking you to keep an open mind, like Cisco is too, because it's like, Cisco would never do anything to hurt you. Everything he does and says is because he's trying to help. So that was interesting. It turns out that is a case. That is Icicle, and basically using the serum from Caitlin, he was planning on getting rid of his human side, Caitlin's dad, so that he can be Icicle full time, which is interesting because it makes you wonder what made him decide to wait all this time. I mean, to be fair, he kind of had to wait a while anyway for her powers to develop. But then, like, I guess maybe he said that her father Thomas hasn't heard anything in a very long time. That doesn't mean over the course of these 20 years he hasn't been in control, but maybe he was fighting back the entire time. So basically, maybe this season is kind of when he was kind of like completely lost, that Icicle completely took control. That might be the case, because it's like, why out of any point in time now? Why not during season 4? It's not my question. Like when she was full, her and Killer Frost were kind of in full cahoots and stuff like that, in full control. You waited until after she lost Killer Frost to come at this angle. But I guess that's also kind of the point. Maybe if she was Killer Frost, maybe she would have noticed. So maybe that's another reason to come attack this situation now. There's all those clues to come find her, and I guess those are things he set up after time. I mean, he had been watching her for a while, so it's probably like he set all in motion, knew exactly where to leave clues to get her down, because they'd already heard all the progress in Star Labs. So it's kind of... But luckily, when the time came for him to use the serum on himself, Killer Frost kicked in. And I love that, being like, he's like, oh, come with me, together we could be so powerful. But she's like, I'm stronger because they're my family. These are the people that actually care about me. I'm like, Killer Frost or Frost, because it's so interesting to see that progression. I mean, the full villain her was only on Earth too, and now it's just like this Caitlin situation. It's kind of like, oh, I'm not Killer Frost and I'm not Caitlin, I'm somewhere in between. But then like now it's become a situation even more so of like, oh no, like, because everyone's warmed up to Killer Frost, and Frost, I should keep saying it, it's like warmed up to everyone. So I like that shift and how that's handled, and I'm glad to have Killer Frost. I'm going to keep saying Killer Frost back, just because I like that dynamic in Caitlin's character, and it's just going to be interesting, because it's just like, oh, like if her emotions kind of flare up, it activates and stuff like that. But obviously it's something she's got to get back and learning how to control again if she wants any hope of, being fully connected with Killer Frost. So I'm glad to kind of have that element kind of back into the show. Sadly, her dad is away, but hopefully the fact is that he's trying to get rid of Thomas means that Thomas is somewhere inside of Icicle. So they've got to track him down again. But, it's sad. It's so sad, because it's like you were so close to your dad, and it just ended up being all kind of this fake thing. But he's still there. He's still alive. Basically, he hid himself away because he saw what the experiments were doing to himself. So that's why he secluded himself. And it seems like that's why her mom was hiding all this too, because she didn't want to tell her the truth. Which is interesting, considering the fact is, it's like, well, you already know your daughter was going through the same thing. Well, to be fair, like, by the time she talked to her mom about the whole thing back in season 3, well, yeah, when she was trying to get rid of the whole situation, is Killer Frost hadn't fully developed yet. Her powers had, slept out, but she hadn't fully developed as a metahuman, which is interesting, because technically, I guess her whole situation doesn't... I mean, I guess it does. It's just an even more so manufactured metahuman. The reason why I say even more so, because it's like, I mean, I guess it's on the same level as any other metahuman, because all metahumans are manufactured in some shape or form. Even these new ones, they're byproducts of the Enlightenment and the satellite crashing down. But it's also like the original metahumans are all byproducts of the particle accelerator exploding. So it's just all kind of interesting how that all kind of flows together. So there's that. Then another side of things is the whole Iris and Nora thing, which I thought was kind of neat. They're with Sherlock, and it's kind of like, oh, so she's like, I want to go with you, Mom, and investigate. And I'm like, oh my God, it's like you're bonding now. You even see Barry kind of smiling and being happy about it. And she wants to see how Iris does her work, and investigate and stuff like that. She's like, oh, okay. Iris is like, okay, so you can run around, try and see if you can find any of the salad. He's like, oh, I thought I'd go with you when you go, question the witnesses. And she's like, oh, I usually do this alone. I mean, she's like, oh, of course you would. And it's kind of like awkward back and forth between them like that. And Sherlock's like, okay, fine, I'll help you. And basically him drinking his chamomile tea, which is supposed to help with the brain, but also his digestive system, because he's been backed up ever since he's been on Earth. And I love the look on Nora and Iris's face, like, ew, gross. That's disgusting. But I thought that was kind of adorable, them kind of working together. Like, she's like, oh yeah, you could go in the water and do what your dad did when he was fighting King Shark. She's like, or I could do what you did when you were Speedster. She's like, you know about it? I was like, yeah, I asked Papa Joe everything about when you were a Speedster. And they got like, ah! So it's a cute little thing between them. So I thought it was kind of nice. We can obviously tell Sherlock was there just to be like, oh yeah, kind of point them in the right direction, because the whole thing was for them to kind of experience it together, kind of work together. Like, he'd already figured everything out, but still, and doing his little part to help and everything. So I thought it was kind of neat. And then the other pairing was kind of adorable, was Ralph and Cecile. It's like, he's like, I need, Joe's help, someone who's intimidating. She's like, oh, well, you must not think I'm intimidating. And Ralph is quiet. She's like, oh my God, you don't think I'm intimidating. And she got all up in his face, like standing on the couch and like getting like higher than him. And it's like, Cecile can be scary when she wants to be. I love her being like, the fact of the matter is, I'm the one who put Barry inside of the Thinker's mind. I'm literally the one who saved the world in between contractions, and you're telling me I'm not intimidating? He's like, I'm sorry, you're right. You're really intimidating me right now. And she's like, good. And she's all happy about it and everything. And she's like, okay, I got my war face on, and they confront that FEMA dude, and things didn't go down the way she thought it would. And she's like, no, wait, dude, I got my war face on. I'm like, that's adorable. Like, Cecile being like that is so adorable. I thought that was kind of interesting. Also, I love the nickname that Ralph calls her by, because it's like, oh yeah, people fear her as Cecile, your fate. I was like, shut up. That's so good. I like that. I like that a lot. But then Cecile comes back in full force, and she's like, no, I haven't missed this step. Because I also love her being like, Ralph, don't ever call me that again. He's like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, the fact of the matter is, I thought we were having this little bonding moment. I guess I still went too far. She's like, no, I'm just joking and messing with you. I'm like, it's so amazing. And then Ralph kind of gets his nose twitching like a mouse and sound like, what was that? And he's like, I do that anytime I feel like there's a mystery afoot. She's like, don't ever do that again. That's gross. He's like, oh, okay, you sure? So she's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, poor Ralph. But in this episode, they made a pretty good team. Turns out that FEMA guy was pretty terrible, because he was actually stealing insurance money from people. So, but this has all brought them closer to finding out Cicada, because now all the records have led them to Cicada's daughter. Now they just got to follow that to him, which we learned a little bit about Cicada this episode. Obviously, he ended up killing another metahuman. It's like I said, his hate for metahumans goes all across the board, but it does seem like he goes specifically after well, for one, it seems like the dagger can identify metahumans. That was something I was curious about. Do you just stumble across them using their powers? It's like, no, I guess the dark matter inside of the blade reacts to the dark matter in metahumans, and so he attacks the one who had like the razor blades for arms, which, to be fair, she had already attacked someone, because that same person she attacked is in the hospital, because the doctor talks about healing that person up. So it's like, yeah, it's that situation of like, it's kind of interesting, because the doctor seems like she supports what Cicada does, because for her, it's like she's had to treat people who've been attacked by metahumans for the past 4 years. But to be fair, once again, that's a situation of there's good metahumans too, which even he was like, the fact of the matter is that when he talked to Barry, the Flash, when he was like, you should have killed the other metahumans when you had a chance. But it's like, like I said, it's a grand scheme of things, because I'm sure for him, it's like all these metahumans that run rampant, maybe he already had an issue with them, but now he has the strength to do something about it. It might have something to do with the fact that his daughter, Grace's mom, like, it seems like she might not be in a picture, so she might have been killed by a metahuman, so he never had the power to really fight against them. Now it's like, these are beings with immense power, and you don't have the real strength to fight them back, but now he does with this blade, because not only can he match them on strength level, he can actually take away their abilities and make them 100% human again, So it's just an interesting element. What really surprised me is the fact is that the Doctor is so okay with it. But I guess, because even she kind of has a little bit of metahuman hate. I mean, because it's an aspect that never really gets brought up too much in this show. It's like, yeah, metahumans are evil too, and all the people that... I mean, you do forget that sometimes, not all the times, but a lot of times when metahumans that the team is facing off against tend to kill people, so... But once again, it's kind of sad that all metas kind of get lumped together in that, which is... It's always interesting. It makes you wonder, do they do that on purpose or not, in the sense of, like, correlations between different series, because obviously this kind of coincides to a certain extent with what's going on Supergirl, obviously to a different it's similar in certain regards, but it's not the full-blown hate group like the Agent of Liberty situation is. This is just one dude, that he has a doctor who's on his side who kind of shares his opinion, but maybe it's supposed to be a little reminiscent of like the whole situation last season with the Thinker and his wife, like them kind of being on the same page up to a certain extent. So, but which is interesting considering the fact is the Doctor's all about do no harm, but I guess it's like, all these metahumans are bad news, so it's kind of like he's taking out bad people, so I'm sure that's how she justifies it, so, so I'm curious to see how that all turns out, because it also seems like, I guess the longer it's in him, the stronger he gets. Also makes you wonder, like, because I was wondering, like, if that wound was going to just magically heal or something on him or something. Like, I thought, like, something like he'd end up having an accelerated healing rate. But if that was the case, why wouldn't the wound on his body heal up? Which shows that he is very human. Like, he has these abilities and stuff like that. But even then, he's very human. He doesn't have, like, some accelerated healing factor like Barry does or whatever, so... Some very interesting developments in this episode. I'm very interested to see where all this takes us in the next episode, considering they are getting closer to Cicada's identity. I would like to kind of fully know why he's doing what he's doing. Like, you have, like I said, to a certain extent, maybe he blames the whole Enlightenment situation. Well, I mean, to be fair, maybe he blames Barry in particular because Barry broke the satellite. The Flash broke the satellite, so maybe the same satellite that hurt his daughter. So, this also stems from it being a Star Labs satellite. Star Labs also created metahumans, so maybe he chalks this whole like DeVoe situation up to being metahuman thing too, because the Thinker was a metahuman, so I get it all kind of becomes relative. So I guess that might be the justification, like how he kind of came to what he did, because I think I let it slip my mind. It's like, yeah, the Thinker was a metahuman. I forgot like his DeVoe's initial ability, his brain being the way it is, initially stemmed from the particle accelerator, so. Oh yeah, also this interesting side note, just the fact is he mentions Victor Freeze, which I was thinking that was kind of interesting. I was like, oh, Mr. Freeze. I thought that was kind of interesting. I completely forgot. Was his name always Freeze? I thought his last name, maybe it was. I thought it was like Fries or something like that. I forgot when, I'm basing this all on Gotham, because that's the most, obviously that's like part of his origin story popped up in that, so I was like, but maybe it is Freeze, but obviously it's spelled differently. So, I mean, maybe it's just one of those things where it's like his supervillain name is... His name initially was a play on it that eventually led to him becoming the villain that his name is a play on, essentially. You get what I'm trying to say? So maybe that's what that is. But that was just kind of interesting. A little nice name drop villain-wise. So maybe that was even more reason to be like, oh, I mean, to be fair, you can't blame someone for someone that they know. So it's just because he knows the person who eventually becomes Mr. Freeze doesn't say much. But I mean, it's just kind of interesting because he then himself turns out to be an ice villain himself. Which begs the question, like, was that kind of intentional? Also, the other person he mentioned, was that someone else that ended up being a villain, or was that just some random doctor to be like, oh, this other name and this particular person's name? I feel like that other name he mentioned, I forgot what it was, but that other name might have been someone of note as well. But, who knows? Like I said, that was just something I wanted to add on at the end there, so. And now moving on to this week's episode of Black Lightning, a very interesting episode. A lot of things we ended up learning about in this episode. For one, we find out about the Sanjay and the Perdi, which is interesting just because it seems like, I mean, Freeland's got its race issues, but man, like the fact is that South Freeland is like that is kind of crazy. It's like, because it seems like that side of Freeland's kind of been like that since slavery ended, where like the Sanjay live on one side and then like the Perdi stay to the woods and stuff like that. It seems like basically Anaya and Deacon's whole love situation is basically a Romeo and Juliet tale. Because the sad thing is, like, it turns out that Deacon was killed by Josh. I guess, I don't know what his relation... Well, I guess he's kind of like... it's kind of one of that thing of like, oh, like we're like, I don't know, because he's like, I guess like someone that she was close to. Maybe they grew up as friends and he thought there was more. Maybe there was at some point in time, but she fell in love with Deacon, and so he ended up killing Deacon because it's like, oh, she fell in love with Osanjis because the hate between them runs deep. And so, which is kind of sad in the long run, because it plays, like I said, plays out like a Romeo and Juliet situation, just as tragic, just kind of in its own way. But at the very least, it seems like there probably has been some sense of a truce that obviously they don't mess with the Sanjay don't mess with the Perdi, but they each equally hate each other for whatever real reason we don't really know. Because it turns out the leader of the Perdi is, I mean, not the Perdi, of the, well, since I was talking about the Perdi, isn't Mayor, I'm pretty sure the actress who plays Anaya's mom, that looks like that's the actress who played Rose in Outcast. I could be 100% wrong, but it kind of looks like her. Maybe they just look a little similar, but I think that's the same actress. But getting to what I was trying to say, what the Sanjay is, the leader of it is Looker. And it seems like it's very interesting because it seems like it gives them enhanced strength. At the very least, it gives them ability. So far, it seems more so like they're just super fast, but there might be more to it. Or maybe at the very least, whatever it is that they can do, maybe Looker can do it in a bigger fold, in a sense of something like, what I'm trying to say is, maybe they only get because they're not the original bearer of the element, only she gets the full benefit of it. Maybe they only get a fraction of it, hence in their case, super speed. It doesn't seem like they were necessarily super strong or anything, but maybe they were, and you just didn't really get to see it. But I'm curious to see ultimately what she can do with the element, because she can bend it. Obviously, she can absorb it, but we don't know the full scale of what she can do with it. Also, the actress who plays Looker seems familiar. Like, I've definitely seen her in stuff before. But it seems like she might kind of have a Tobias thing going on, because she got here like 30 years ago, and she doesn't look like she's that old. So either she like got to Freeland super young. I mean, to be fair, it's not like Jeff looks all that old either, you know? So they might actually be relatively close to the same age, or it might just be the fact is that she ages super slowly, or, you know, because Jeff got the serum, you know, the vaccine when he was fairly young too, so her situation might be the same. But what I'm curious is about, because obviously this whole Sanji and Perdi situation already existed, so it's like, how did she come in and get mixed up in all this? Because it seemed like more so like she was an outsider, because it's like, oh, she showed up in Freeland 30 years ago, then ended up getting the vaccine. So it's like, what's going on with that? Like, was she someone that like escaped from the ASA? Is that why she's here, like here doing her own thing rather than being anywhere else? Because it's like, oh, she gets to be here and embrace it. Like, was she someone that was originally part of the Sanjays but got experimented on because of this whole vaccine thing, and she got away from the ASA? I mean, she might be. I mean, because this actually sets up some very interesting things, because it means that Jeff isn't the only person who got metahuman abilities from the vaccine that are around her kicking. I mean, to be fair, most of them are in the pods, obviously, but to think that someone actually escaped all of that is kind of interesting. So it begs the question, are they the only two that did all this time, which is interesting. Maybe there are others, and maybe that'll kind of end up developing in its own way. But I think it's so fascinating because I wasn't expecting there to be another antagonist kind of setup, because I was curious if this whole thing, like that silver stuff, which we now know is the element, I was wondering if that was connected to whatever it is Tobias has up his sleeve, but it's like, no, it seems like we're getting two villains this season, like obviously playing out Tobias' story while also doing this, which, to be fair, Tobias and Looker might kind of join forces in that regard. We'll have to wait and see, but we might see them kind of end up collaborating in that regard, because, I mean, obviously Looker is able to create her own army. To be fair, it does seem like they do have a free will of their own to some degree, because it turns out like a lot of the Sanjay don't want the element, they're just kind of stuck with it. Because it seems like, as she did with that Jake dude, it's like once you take it out of their body, they die. I guess it's like once it's been in your system long enough, it's impossible to remove it without it killing you, because it's bonded with you. It's become a part of you. Or maybe there is a way of removing it without killing you, but maybe just because she chose to kill him, she was able to kill him. So, like I said, I'm just curious to understand what her motives is on why she is doing all of this, kind of keeping up the whole Sanjay thing. And what about the babies? The babies have Sanjay, so they do have the ability too. It seemed like she was trying to take the element out of the kids, but it seemed like it didn't operate properly. It seemed like it wouldn't 100% come to her, but maybe it did. Maybe she was able to tap into it, but you know, because now it's like, oh, there's twins, so, which the fact that she has that baby sadly means that Anaya's parents are most likely dead. Everyone else that was kind of protecting the baby with them is dead, so it's kind of sad that things kind of ended up playing out that role. We don't know they're dead. We didn't see that, but part of me wonders, you don't think on some level, I mean, they have their issues and everything, but you don't think like Anaya's parents gave over the baby to kind of save their lives? Because I feel like the Sanjays wouldn't allow that. It's like, oh, you're Perdis, you caused all this issue, we have a problem with you anyway, so let's take you out. I don't know. Well, what I also thought was kind of interesting is that the fact of the matter is, was the whole situation with the babies what Looker was sensing? Because she was like, look and see what's going on. So I guess with the element, something kind of surged and she was feeling it. I'm also curious, like with the element being gone, like Deacon's in particular is somewhere in Freeland, you know, wherever Anissa left it. So it's like, does she feel that piece of her being missing? Like the fact is that she kind of has this like queen bee control over these people, kind of like they're part of her hive and stuff like that. I'm curious, like, just the depths of what her ability are. Like, is it just this, or is there more to it when it comes to herself? Like I said, we haven't really seen. It does seem like she can tap into the element in everyone else and at the very least utilize it. But what's interesting is the fact is that it seemed like she had to tap into the element from another Sanjay before she was able to see what the others were able to see. Is that something, you know, was she just doing that just to do it? Or is it because that is how she keeps an eye on him? I don't know. It was pretty sick that Anissa and Jeff were able to work together to take care of the situation. I'm guessing, which we ended up finding out this episode, that Gambi's still alive. No surprise, but he hasn't let anyone know he's alive because it's like, yeah, there's always going, if I go back and let anyone know I'm alive, even Jeff and Anissa, he can't take the chance. Whoever put the hit out on him finds out that he's still alive, which is the big question, who put the hit out on him. Like I said last time, my money is on the ASA, but I could be 100% wrong about that. Also shows you, man, Gambi is really the kind of like no holds barred dude. He's really the one that kind of is willing to do anything. You have Jeff talking about killing Tobias, but it makes you wonder when the time comes, will he actually do it? I don't think he will. And Gambi, on the other hand, is like, nah, no hesitations. Chop the dude's fingers off to torture him, and the dude's like, this is unprofessional, not in front of my family, and he's talking about his 2 dogs. Gambi put some bullets in him and apologizes to the dogs as he left. I was like, wow. Gambi's brutal. Also, that sweet maneuver of slipping through the open panel of the car as it was tilting like that. It's like, because I was like, at what point did you get out? I was like, okay, that's one way to get out. And he roll dodged and he kept going like it was nothing. It's like, yo. So we'll have to kind of see on that front. But the fact of the matter is, I'm guessing he's the one that set it up to make it so that the computer, well, because he's the one that got the notice about Anissa being in danger. Well, at the very least, like her setting her beacon off. I guess it was meant to be like for Jeff to find it, but maybe like Gambi set it up so that it would go off at the computer at the bunker. But I guess, well, I'll consider it a bunker, but I don't know if it really be considered a bunker. But, you know, I'm sure it just naturally went off like that. Because Gambi did show up with, like, a drone to help. He didn't go there in person, but still. That was interesting. So, but sadly, like I said, you know, Looker has one of the babies. In particular, she wants the other baby. At the very least, it's like, well, this baby's black, the other baby's white. So it's like, hey, let's take that one. That one's more Sanjay. This one's more Perdi, but, you know, which does not end well for that twin. So we'll see what ends up happening with that. But it is kind of interesting because we are seeing this element is very different. I mean, well, funny I used the word element. Just because it's like, well, with Jeff, obviously you have Jennifer and Anissa having powers, and it seems like the same thing kind of applies in this regard. But what's really interesting is because the element isn't naturally in Deacon. It was in, you know, Looker, but she gave it to Deacon. So it seems like when it's passed on to other people, it can be passed on to a next generation as well. So it's just quite the fascinating circumstances. And we see Jeff was following a good chunk of it back to Looker, because when those people died, those Sanjay died, the element left him and is going back to her. So that's definitely going to be interesting. Because I was worried. I was like, with her power like that, she could control anyone, technically. Like I said, I mean, it does seem like they do have some free will of their own. But I guess it's like, if they don't want to die, they do what she says. So I was worried, could she do that to Jeff? Which I guess she could, but maybe just because him being a metahuman and stuff like that, it wouldn't have an effect on him. Or him being who he is, being black, she probably wouldn't want to, but I'm curious to see what would happen in that regard. So while we have all of that happening, we also have the whole situation with Lynn still reeling with the fact of the matter is like, oh man, like half the kids died. And now she has to tell the parents, but she can't be specific. I guess it's because it's a situation of like, because of this whole ASA situation, she can't talk about the specifics, and which makes her feel horrible because it makes her feel like she's culpable with all of this because everyone else is going to look at her as like, oh yeah, you sold out to the government. That's even how like some people are treating her, and that's how she feels. And it's like, I'm curious, Odell, like what's his thought going to be in this? Because all of this is his fault because he's the one that suggested that Lynn work with Jason in the first place, and now 14 kids are dead because of it. But I'm sure Odell doesn't really care. It's kind of like, well, the other 14 are alive. We can study them. That's all that matters. I mean, to be fair, maybe there's more to him. Maybe he is a bit more caring. But so far, it just seems kind of like an asshole. But we'll see in that regard. But you can see the devastation that this has kind of left Lynn in, because for her, it's like, the fact is we found a solution that could save those 14 meant that maybe if given enough time, we could have found another way to save the other 14, And for her, it's like looking at them, she can't help but think of Anissa and Jennifer. And what I thought was kind of interesting, Jennifer was like, well, the fact of the matter is, it's not your fault that they died, but they were still your responsibility. And Lynn's like, thanks. And she's like, thanks. And Jennifer was like, I didn't mean it like that. I'm like, how the hell did you mean that? Like, it's like, I don't see any other way you were trying to, I don't know how she was trying to spin that towards making her mom feel better. It's like, your mom's already in a low point, and it just felt like you were just kicking her while she was down. Because I was like, what were you trying to say with that? She never clarified, but it just, it didn't come out well. So it's definitely going to be interesting going forward with that whole situation, sees how Lynn continues to handle that. I'm curious to see what the ASA's response is going to be in this situation. Like I said, we'll have to wait and see in that regard. But another element to this episode is the whole Khalil situation with Tobias. For one, Tobias sending him to kill the Reverend because it's like, oh, he won't move the clinic. Because it's like, oh yeah, I already know Tobias is behind you. And this is also where Khalil's like, wait a minute, your first attempt on him, you're the reason why I got paralyzed in the first place. It's like, oh, right. Of course, you didn't know that. Right. So Tobias kind of tipped his hand, but I guess he doesn't care because it's like, I got you. I manipulated you. I got what I needed you to be. You're painkiller now, so I don't have to really worry about it too much. But it definitely puts Khalil in a very interesting situation because for him, it's like, for him, he felt like he had nowhere else to go. Like, that's why, even after finding out Tobias is the reason why he is where he is right now, that Tobias manipulated and controlled him, it's like, I literally have nowhere else to go because of all the terrible things I did. Because even the Reverend was like, the fact of the matter is, it's not too late for you, Khalil, when Khalil was about to strangle him. But it's like, for Khalil, he's like, no, I'm not a killer. Because even Jennifer was like, that's not who you are. That's why she's right, like, by him. When she was talking about, Mom, you always told us to be about the truth and everything, I was like, oh, she's going to tell him about Khalil. And then she said that thing that she said, I was like, I don't know what you were trying to say with that. But I thought she was going to bring up the whole Khalil thing, which she might circle back around and do that because of the whole Khalil versus Tobias thing. That was crazy. I knew he didn't stand a chance because Tobias is stupid strong. I knew Khalil didn't stand a chance, but it's like, he still held his own, landing in some blows. He landed the first blow and everything, but Tobias kicked his ass, and that was brutal. I was like, ugh. And Tobias kept punching him, and then he's like, oh, you broke my fish tank. It's like, dude. I guess in his mind, it's like, if I can't get you to submit naturally, it's like, I've been too kind to you. I need to break you before you submit. That's how I whip you back into shape and make you into the weapon I need you to be, essentially. I need to break you first, essentially. So that was a tough situation. Even sad, the fact is Khalil had to hide from Jennifer his wounds. He's acting like this is the last time they'll see each other, so I'm guessing he's going to go on the run, like leave, potentially. We'll see if that works out or not, but there's part of me that keeps expecting Jennifer to actually tell him, like, oh, I'm a metahuman. Like, I wonder, will she tell her dad or anything about this? Because it's like, this might be an opportunity to help Khalil. Like, he deserves a chance. Obviously, her dad, probably even Anissa, even Lynn, probably wouldn't be too keen about that idea. Because let's bring up what Anissa brought up before that Jennifer kind of brushed off. He killed Dad. No, he killed Black Lightning, as Jennifer said. It's like, really? You splitting hairs on this? So there's that. So we'll see whether Jennifer acts upon that or not, because it's like she wants to look out for Khalil because she cares about him, obviously. So the question then becomes, like, what's she going to do? What is Khalil going to do? What's going to happen with the Reverend? Because it wasn't Khalil, but Tobias will hire someone else to do it, or he'll even do it himself, or he'll push Khalil to be the one to do it. So I'm really interested to see where that all goes too. It's definitely getting more and more interesting with each episode, and I'm very interested to see what the next episode has in store for us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good